Okay, greetings everybody. Welcome to Vision to Reality Fireside Chat. Let me just start by saying, the adoption of Knowledgecraft is still an experiment for most firms. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
It says connecting again. So
yeah, looks like it connects and deconnects.
Yeah. All right, good to go. All right. So the adoption of Knowledgecraft technology is still an experiment for most firms. If you were at the benchmarking session we did this morning, you'll know that somewhere around 65% of the industry is at the pilot stage or below. Some companies, however, the ones on this panel, Merck, Bosch, Deloitte, have crossed that Rubicon and are starting to make Knowledgecraft a sustainable part, if you will, of their internal operational infrastructures. So this conversation is going to be on that side of the story, right? We're going to talk about this from three different perspectives. The first is how they got there. The second is how they get buy-in from the CTO's office. And the final part is about getting users used to a new way of operating. So to do that, we're going to have this conversation around the table. So let's get into it. Felix, if you don't mind, let me start with you, because kind of tell me, why did your firm decide to make this plunge? Like, what's going on, and what was it about Knowledgecraft that made it the ideal approach?
Yeah. So thanks for the introduction, Mike. I'm definitely happy to answer that question. So a couple of years ago, we started with asking the question, can semantics help in the way we are dealing with data at Bosch? So as you might imagine, we have a large number of data sources, different departments working on data, not kind of a heterogeneous structure on all that data sources. And people started to build applications to make use of the data, AI, all that stuff. But one piece was somehow missing, to get an integrated view of the data and to become much faster in the data preparation task. So a lot of effort is spent on, roughly 80% on the data project is spent on data preparation, data integration tasks, and 20% only on the analysis. And we asked ourselves, is this the way to go? Does this scale in the future? And we said, maybe there is some technology out there. And that's how we started our journey into the Knowledgecraft topic, with a small research activity in central research. And now gradually this is becoming an initiative where more and more people jump onto the topic of Knowledgecraft and see the potential in the company. So we made it quite a few on the steps on the journey. So I think we are over that pilot phase, going into more like the mainstream use of the Knowledgecraft technology at Bosch.
So Jörg, is it kind of a similar story? We're talking about an integration, kind of dealing with interconnectivity across processes challenge?
No, I would say coming from another industry, although we might have the same challenges, but we are highly regulated, right? And since we have bringing drugs on the market, so our journey started really in regulatory, although I think Knowledgecraft have already quite a long story in clinical space. Regulatory is rather new, and we were driven really by external authority pressure to be more compliant and going forward. And clearly the standard database-centric approach wouldn't help us anymore, because we are driven by external controlled vocabularies, taxonomies, whatever. And in order to keep this under control, we have chosen the way going more to the Knowledgecraft, so putting data into the center rather than databases in the center. And we started the journey roughly 3 years ago. And yeah, we are quite above the pilot phase already, and trying now also to convince others follow us on this way here.
So in essence, pushed by the regulators and then saw the practical value and went from there.
Absolutely right.
Vinay, why don't we compare that a little bit now to the financial industry, right? Because the business case is overwhelming, but not quite as practical, in my opinion.
Very true. And similar to what George mentioned, it's initially like they have built out all these artifacts, regulatory-driven artifacts, predominantly like BCBS, like building a lineage, building metadata, technical system metadata, all business metadata. And CGOs have all this information right now, and they see Knowledge Graph as a way to kind of make this data alive. So when I say that make the data alive, it's connecting this kind of the metadata information with an operational data, where you can see an issue in the system and you want to do a real-time analysis, impact analysis, how this issue is going to impact, say, my reg report generation, my profitability management. So those kind of analysis can be possible only through Knowledge Graph, and existing, there's no way it can join through multiple metadata sources. This has been the latest trend we've been noticing in the financial industry.
Yeah, so let me follow up on that, because you mentioned BCBS 239, which, watershed regulation or principles that basically said you got to fix your infrastructure, right? That we have all this fragmentation that kind of naturally evolved, and you've got to go fix it because we have to be able to do aggregation and scenario-based analysis. And are you suggesting that message has resonated in some of the clients that you're talking to, and they're starting to understand this idea of infrastructure?
Absolutely. So it's not an easy puzzle to solve, to realize off the bat, given most of the landscape, banks and the financial institution are massive, and they go through multiple hubs generating a report, and the regulators are asking, show me what you're doing it at an instrument level. So now we're realizing I can't really solve this with a database kind of a solution. I need a more powerful tool, and they obviously Knowledge Graph is one of the top choices for that.
So Felix, what are the essential capabilities that you see from Graph that make it appealing, kind of vis-a-vis the infrastructure, the conventional infrastructure that already existed within Bosch?
Well, So I see this integrated view as a very powerful thing to do, and it's this abstraction from the underlying data sources, enabling a decoupling of the data sources themselves. They can change, and you can put applications on top, which you can actually, if you have standardized semantic models like ontologies that are not only used for one use case, then you can build applications on top, which can be reused across different use cases and business units. So to give you an example, we are currently working on a manufacturing, standardized manufacturing data model for Bosch, which is used throughout the entire company, different business units, whereas currently the business units have all different data sources and different data models. And the power of the graph technology is to really map the underlying data sources towards that standardized model and then have standardized applications on top. That's one huge benefit of the technology. The other one is that it really helps to ease the communication of the different people dealing with the data. So managers can look at the data, domain experts can look at the data, they understand what they are talking about without having to know all the details of the underlying data sources. So this greatly helps to reduce the complexity involved with data management tasks.
So for all of you, I'm kind of curious, where is Knowledge Graph capabilities most aptly applied? And on the kind of the reverse, where is it not appropriate to be using Knowledge Graph as opposed to a conventional relational infrastructure? York?
Yeah, I can jump on that. And I'm really hooking to what Felix just said. So even though we are in the industry, I also could echo exactly what he just said. And exactly what you said is, so where does it not work? So, for instance, we always hear this discussion in our company about the silos, and let's get rid of silos. No, we have a lot of well-established systems, and they are due to compliance and other regulations, whatever, and they do an excellent job. And I would never come to an idea and say, get away of this kind of regulatory information management systems, or with kind of signal detection systems, or like security, safety systems, whatever. No, they are there for a good reason, and nobody would come to the idea and replace them with a knowledge graph. That makes absolutely no sense. Where it comes into the game is saying exactly what Felix says. What is the abstraction layer, and where do we want to have, for instance, pharmacovigilance data showing signals combined with regulatory data, and the horizon is really big what you can do there. So you really go on this level and connecting data points from there, and I think that's where the touch point starts, right? And so it's not getting rid of silos. That's not the topic. They are there, and then you leverage really the company knowledge and the leveraging the data, bringing more value for us is connecting it on this abstraction layer, and then bring it to the people and saying not really the knowledge graph, but what can you put on top of it and give it to the machines and people really to understand then this abstraction layer. So that's a strategy.
Yeah, so I think you're really describing the huge benefit. Instead of ripping and replacing our infrastructure, you're basically just mapping it up together so that it works with the existing applications that are already in place. And that's got to be the selling proposition, right?
Yeah, correct.
All right, so I'm sorry. You want to
I just want to add to that. So I look at like the data architecture end of the day. So you at the bottom of the pyramid, you have systems which generate data. Top of it, sometimes you could see something like a master data. And master data, I don't see knowledge graph playing a big role. And there have been cases people have tried it, and that their organization have come and asked us, like, it can be used. And then when you take a level, as you start building like data lakes, I would say that's the next tier where you have all the sources into data lakes. And definitely there is a use case of using knowledge graph there. And then you go one tier above that, which is more like an analytical solution. And definitely there's also knowledge graph can be used there. So I feel as we go along the pyramid of like from the source all the way to the analytical use cases, the usage of knowledge graph increases proportionally, I feel.
All right, so let me skip ahead and build off. Vinod, let me just kind of build off what you started with, because can you summarize where we are from a technology perspective? And really, I'm thinking about it. What's required to get buy-in from the CTO and the CIO's office that are responsible for the infrastructure of the organization? Where are we and what's required?
Okay. So definitely, I think there are a couple of aspects to it. One, they want to see a direct business impact. In cases, the financial regulation, financial services regulation is one of the key areas where they can really leverage knowledge graph. And driven by knowledge graph, they have been mandated to do that, I would say, indirectly. And the second piece to it is more from an inside looking within the organization. I feel like you need a catalyst. It can be a CTO or a CIO, or it can be even a CDO in some places where we have seen. Who can be the catalyst to say, if this knowledge graph is a solution that we need to implement, and implementing, bringing a team in, having that do a quick POC and pushing it through. I think that's one of the critical steps that we have seen successful in implementing it.
So Jorg or Felix, it's got to be a resiliency, a scalability, a security. I mean, you've got to be able to position this correctly into the overall infrastructure of the organization.
Yes, definitely. And I can add to that. I think it needs this critical mass to be successful. And it's not a technology that explains itself to the people. So you have to really show people the value of it with simple examples that they are able to understand. It's good to start small and then scale up and say, this is the first use case that we have, for example, realized, and this resulted in that business impact, for example. And then again, you need some people what we did is kind of have people like catalyst people in the business units that themselves are convinced of the technology to get it spread. But we also involved our central data strategy team, and they are also now going in the direction of using semantic data models. So I think it's different pieces, and as well several convincing sessions to the CDO in our case to make that broader initiative happen in the company.
Yeah. So Jorgo, what does it take to move it from experiment to operational infrastructure?
Okay. Yeah. Just to hook on what Felix just said. So I think in our cases, first of all, start small. Yes, having the use cases, but we were driven, as I said, from the regulators. But the problem is if you're dealing with knowledge workers, having a kind of scientific knowledge worker, he doesn't care too much if he has a database or a knowledge graph. If the people are not having the data literacy behind it, so they couldn't care less. So at a certain moment, first you have to bring and say, okay, what is the value for you from data perspective? And then comes the next step for us, or came from us, and saying, okay, if they understand what is the value of the data perspective, why is the graph better than anything else? But you have to be positioned, be in the shoes of a labeling person, or let's say a pharmacovigilance person. They want to do their job, so they don't care too much if it's a graph or a database. So that's where you have to hook in and say, where's the benefit in for you, and how you can fastest achieve your goals in there. And that is the leverage arm, let's say, where we still also work on our side and say, how can we bring it more to the table, and the people understand with this technology they're getting faster to their goals, right? So that's how we try to attack it here.
No, I can't resist the opportunity to say, listen, you all are customers of Cambridge Semantics. So I want to know how the knowledge graph capability has evolved, and why should the CTO have confidence now in where we are as an industry, where Cambridge is as a data vendor, right? Where are we on that curve? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
I would draw parallel to kind of a big data evolution. So that happened around like 2011, 12, where it was an initial phase, and then it like spiked off starting that point. I think we are at the brink of going macro and much faster. I think the next 2 years, I think every organization, I would assume, would have at least a knowledge graph implementation in their infrastructure.
So maturity is clearly happened. Felix,
Yeah, I can definitely say that. If you look at the history, it's a second wave of the semantic technologies. I think the first wave was, it started with the semantic web like 20 years ago, and then there was a hype in 2008-9, and then it declined a little bit. And I think the tools have matured from back then until now, and you can really process really large knowledge graphs on reasonable hardware technology. And I think one key is that they the vendors implemented a lot of clever technology there to make that happen, and also to build around what is needed, like a modeling tool, having a good user interface, combining graph with analytics. All that helps to actually make that thing happen. Because back then you had like a graph database and some semantic modeling tool, and you had to stick that together. Now it's offered more in a platform fashion by the vendors. You have a lot of capabilities connecting to the data sources, ingesting the data, doing the modeling, doing the mapping, the blending, and then last but not least, doing the analytics on top of the data, which is a huge step forward in terms of maturity of the technology.
Yeah.
You agree?
I would agree completely with Felix. So what we did the last 2 years now modeling, I mean, I think we have quite heavy data now already in the system, and especially also quite heavy jobs on the ETLs, bringing all this in there. So that's is very stable, and I think we will continue with that. Although I have to say, all these things, and say that it's still heavy work, right, to model all the things. Yes, it's stable environment, but having all this fairy tale saying, oh, once you have modeled it a little bit, and then you bring in data, and by AI or other mythical things, you will teach this environment to follow up. Still, I don't know if we ever reach there. There is still heavy work to do it. Of course, system is stable and mature on that, but still hands-on and really modeling and quite, I mean, going to business and understand the models. Up to now, I didn't see anything taking this away with certain fairy tales from our shoulders here, right?
Could I then extrapolate that and say on your wish list is your support for model enhancement? What is on your wish list from Cambridge? You got their
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's really in the area of fairy tales, whatever. I mean, at a certain moment, you need brains and people, right? So I can never give it and say, so you have 10%, and then the rest 90% you get by training from any artificial intelligence. I don't expect that working. But maybe if you have a bunch of data saying, okay, what brings you faster than to your result, having then huge installations, how can you reach it once you are over a hill, let's say, reaching then the goal rather than continuously model and work on that. I mean, I have no solution. If you ask on that, I didn't see it yet. But yeah, if I would have a wish list, great, that would be really good.
Maybe I can add to that. I think where it would or there could be some improvements is in the area of mapping. I mean, keeping especially if your model evolves or your data evolves, you have to manually go through all these mapping steps and adjust them. So having some support there in the user interface, I think that would be really helpful in my opinion, to speed up things even further in this mapping task. But you're totally right. It's not something that comes via AI or some mystical things or is completely automated. You need to really think about, this is my data source, this is how the data is structured, this is my conceptual model, I would like to map it that way. This for sure will not go away, this mapping effort, but at least it could be supported as much as possible in the tool to speed up things.
Felix, let me stick with you and just switch topics briefly, because I was intrigued in our kind of conversation. You used the term the club of the willing inside your organization to get people to recognize the problem and to embrace the art of the possible. Could you explain what that was in your organization and where you think it's heading?
Sure. So we started with, as I said before, we started with a small research activity and one use case, and then we brought that to a larger audience, to the right people, and we started this idea. Let's start this club of the willing to attract more people to it. And so we had several meetings, we showed the technology, we showed the first use case, and then people started to think, can I use that in my business unit, in my area? Throughout different functional areas, mainly with the business digital officers we have at Bosch in the different business units. And it was quite fascinating to see that people are cross business unit, cross department, willing to actually contribute to that activity. So now everybody is profiting from it. So some guys bring in that use case, the other business unit can make use of it. Some other guys bring in their use case. So there's a really exchange of ideas, and this helps to drive the adoption of the technology forward. So it's kind of I would say a spark point where people get all the information they need about that. And then we added trainings on top to train the people, because it's obviously a completely new technology. I mean, people are used to relational databases, but they don't know necessarily what a graph is, what an ontology is, what RDF is, and how you actually have to use that technology to build up your use case. So that's what we added, and now it works quite well.
Jorg, let me, there's an important time to value proposition that I hear in all these conversations, and that needs to be clear to the business sponsors beyond just the regulatory driver that got you started. So was there a turning point use case that you were able to build from for the business side of the knowledge graph adoption?
No, maybe for us it was, we were in a very lucky position. The driver and the implementer, or let's say the idea of it, was coming from the business. So our VP from regulatory really proposed and say, guys, if we have now this IDMP model, whatever, don't make it too short. Really think a bit faster, further ahead, and go to this technology. So I'm still thankful to this person that he drove us there. So it was not technology, it was business driven in our case.
So, Vinod, I'd like to get your take on the same question, if I could.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also the same way we have seen the business-driven end of the day. When we go talk to the business, we don't even mention about knowledge graph. It is all about how we want to get the results what they're looking for. And then we're going to talk to the CTOs, and hence there we talk about the technology. And most of the times we see CTOs do quickly understand the vanilla RDBMS solution is not going to solve some of the use cases their businesses have. So, yeah.
Before we go into the last concluding moments, I want to tell everybody that we're going to continue this conversation. These speakers have agreed to show up at the Cambridge Semantics booth at the end of this session. So if you want to talk to them directly, you go to the booths and you click on Anzo, then you click on enter, and they'll all be there to answer your questions. So we've only got 3 minutes, and we've got 3 speakers. Let's go around the horn. Give me 1 minute if you could. Advice for the audience. What did you do right? And what would you do differently if you had to start over? And we'll just take it from the top. Jorg, please.
Okay. Yeah, what did we do right? I mean, we started small, right, and slowly evolving here to the people. And what would we differently? I think it's really saying bringing more training and bringing more data literacy quite in the beginning to the people that they could really see what is in for me.
Vinod.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did we do right? I think it's pretty much the same what Jorg mentioned. Start small with this case, and expand that further. What we would do differently, initially we were all about selling the new technology to the business, and we soon realized nobody cares. If it's a knowledge graph, it's a big data, whatever it is.
Right. Stop selling technology. I love it.
Yeah. Stop selling the technology, sell the output, the value we're going to generate.
Felix.
Yeah, to add to that, I think what did we do right? I think we also started small and scaled it up. I think we did a very good job with this Club of the Willing. So more and more people are now interested, are working with the technology. What would we do different? Involve our central IT a little bit earlier to have the platform ready, because it took quite some time to convince them to actually offer this as a service now inside Bosch. And people ask immediately, if you have this as a prototype installation and show it to them, they ask, yeah, is this a service I can rely on? I can build my use case on? So we would start earlier with that one. Yeah.
Felix, in 1 minute remaining, could you talk about, you mentioned the training objective within Bosch, and that there are people lining up to be trained on how to use and how to take advantage of that. Could you elaborate on what's going on?
Yeah, sure. So we sat down because people started to ask always the same question. So we really anticipated kind of a training journey, starting with small training, then 1-day training, then 2-day training, hands-on training, explaining. It's kind of a mix between what is a knowledge graph, why should you use that technology, why is it better in some sense than other technologies for specific use cases, and then hands-on training on creating a knowledge graph, creating a first model, onboarding data, mapping data, and so on. And this is a kind of a key, and I think we have trained more than 150 people now at Bosch in the technology, so they can at least start to use the tool and work with it. Of course, this does not. I mean, it's not sufficient to do their use case, but then we support them in a consulting manner in when they want to create their use case. Yeah.
All right, so we're out of time. I want to remind you again, at 1 o'clock, please join all of us at the Cambridge Semantics booth. Go to booths, click on Anzo and click on enter, and we will continue the Q&A there. Thank you, gentlemen. Very much appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.